You wrote the checks for 40 years. You built that account one paycheck at a time. And the moment your heart stops, a bank clerk you have never met can freeze every dollar of it, and your wife can't touch a cent to bury you. I watched it happen. I sat across from a widow in a bank lobby in Ohio while she was told her own joint money was locked until a court said otherwise. Here is the truth I finally decided to say out loud. There is one free form, it costs nothing. It takes about 10 minutes at the teller window that keeps your account from ever freezing at all. Your money passes straight to the person you name. No court, no lawyer, no waiting. Most Americans your age were never told this form existed, and the reason they weren't told is the part that made me angry enough to make this. Before we're done, I'm going to show you a New York court case from 1904, a real ruling with a real name on it that created a kind of account almost nobody uses anymore on purpose. And it works in the exact bank you already walk into. You don't need to move a dime or open anything new, so let me open the ledger. Let me start with what actually happens the day you die, because almost nobody explains it until it's too late to fix. Most folks believe that if they have a will, their money is safe, that the will is the key that unlocks everything. I believe that too, for years. It is one of the most expensive misunderstandings in America. Here is what really happens. The moment a bank learns an account holder has died, and they find out fast, because Social Security notifies them, funeral homes notify them, the death gets reported, the bank places what they call a hold. For a single owner account with no beneficiary named, that account is frozen solid. Nobody can withdraw. Nobody can pay the mortgage from it. Nobody can cover the funeral. The money is just sitting there, and it is untouchable. To unlock it, your family has to go through a court process called probate. Probate is the legal machine that decides who gets what after you're gone, and it moves at the speed of molasses in January. The national average, depending on the state, runs anywhere from 7 months to over a year. In complicated cases, years. And the whole time, that account sits frozen while the bills keep coming. I remember the widow in Ohio. Her name isn't mine to give, but I'll never forget her hands. She had a checkbook in her purse for an account with her husband's name first on it, and the teller, a kid, maybe 25, told her gently that she'd need to bring in letters from the court before the bank could release anything. She had $11 in her wallet and a funeral bill coming. Her husband had worked 38 years at a tire plant. The money was right there on the screen, and she couldn't have it. That is the moment the whole system shows its face. And here's the part that started my digging. It did not have to be that way. Not for her, not for you. Because there was a form her husband could have signed for free in that same branch years earlier that would have handed her that money the same afternoon he died. No court, no probate, no frozen screen. So why in the world did nobody at that bank ever mention it to him in 38 years of banking there? Probate is not free, not even close. Every state sets its own rules, but the process almost always costs your family a slice of everything you left behind. There are court filing fees, there are executor fees, and above all, there are attorney fees because most families, grieving and confused, hire a probate lawyer to walk them through the maze. Let me give you the real numbers, because this audience respects real numbers. Across the country, probate commonly eats somewhere between 3% and 7% of the total value of an estate. Some states are worse. In California, probate attorney and executor fees are set by law on a sliding scale, and on a $500,000 estate, which is just a paid-off house and a modest savings account, these days the statutory fees can run over $26,000. $26,000 to move money that was already yours, to people you already chose. Now think about who receives that money. The court system collects its fees. The attorneys collect theirs. And here is the quiet part. The longer and more tangled the process, the more the professionals earn. Nobody in that chain has any reason to hand you a free form that skips the whole thing. A free form that avoids probate is, to a probate attorney, a lost customer. I am not telling you every lawyer is a villain. I've known good ones. But I am telling you the system is built so that the default path, the path you land on if nobody tells you otherwise, runs directly through the most expensive door in the building. And the door that costs nothing is standing right next to it, unmarked with no sign on it. I went looking for how long that free door has existed, figuring it was some new modern convenience. It is not. And what I found is going to surprise you, because the tool to skip probate is older than almost everyone watching this. But before I show you the history, let me show you exactly what the form is so the rest lands with full weight. The form is called a Payable on Death designation. In the banking world, they shorten it to POD, Payable on Death. Some banks call it a beneficiary designation. On investment and brokerage accounts, the cousin of this form is called Transfer on Death, or TOD. Same idea, different label. Here is how simple it is. You walk into your bank, you tell them you want to add a payable on death beneficiary to your checking and your savings. They hand you a short form, usually 1 page. You write the name of the person you want the money to go to, their relationship to you, and often their social security number and address. You sign it, that's it. You keep full control of the account while you're alive. You can spend it, close it, change the beneficiary, do whatever you want. The person you named has zero access and zero say while you're breathing. But the second you die, that account is no longer part of the frozen estate. It belongs to your beneficiary the moment they walk in with a death certificate and their ID. No probate, no court, no lawyer, no $26,000 fee. The bank pays it out directly, usually within days. Let me be specific about the cost of this form, because this is the sentence that ought to make you sit up. It is free. There is no charge to add a payable on death beneficiary. There is no annual fee. There is no product to buy. The bank makes nothing by giving it to you, which is precisely why the teller doesn't lead with it. I tested this myself. I walked into 3 different banks and asked, plainly, what happens to this account if I die? 2 of the 3 never mentioned payable on death until I said the words first. One young man actually had to go ask his manager how to process the form, because he'd never done one. These forms exist. The people at the counter often just don't offer them. Now, understand what that means for your family. The difference between signing this form and not signing it is the difference between your spouse having grocery money next Tuesday and your spouse waiting 11 months while a court unwinds your life. Same money, same bank. One free signature stands between the two. And here's a detail almost nobody knows. A payable on death account overrides your will. If your will says one thing and your payable on death form says another, the form wins. The money goes where the form says, and it skips probate entirely. That's how powerful this 1 page is. So the obvious question, the one that kept me up, is how long have ordinary people been allowed to do this? Because if this is some new gift from the banks, fine. But if it's old, if it's been sitting there for generations while families paid lawyers anyway, then somebody let a whole lot of grieving people walk through the expensive door for no reason. Let me lay the oldest document on the table now. The idea of passing a bank account straight to a loved one without a court did not come from a modern bank. It came from a courtroom in New York State in 1904. The case is called In re Totten. A woman had opened savings accounts at her bank and titled them in her own name in trust for another person, meaning she kept the money while she lived, but named who'd receive it when she died. When she passed, the question landed in the New York Court of Appeals. Was that a real, valid way to leave money? Or did it all have to go through probate like everything else? The court ruled it was valid. And in doing so, they created what lawyers to this day still call a Totten trust, named right after that case. A Totten trust is the great-grandfather of the payable on death account. It established, more than 120 years ago, a plain principle. An ordinary person can arrange for a bank account to pass directly to a chosen person at death, keeping full control while alive, and that arrangement does not have to crawl through probate court. Sit with that date, 1904. That is before most of our grandparents were born. The legal right to skip the frozen account and the probate machine has existed in this country for over a century. It is not a loophole. It is not new. It is not a trick some clever person invented last year. It is settled, accepted, boring old law, and it has been quietly available the entire time. Families have been paying thousands to do the same thing the hard way. Over the decades, that 1904 principle grew up. States wrote it into their statutes. The payable on death account became standard at nearly every bank in America. For securities and brokerage accounts, the country adopted something called the Uniform Transfer on Death Security Registration Act at the end of the 1980s, so your stocks and bonds could pass the same simple way. The tools multiplied. The forms became routine paperwork sitting in a drawer behind the counter. That question is where this stops being a sad story and starts being an expose. If you want to go deeper on everything I've just laid out, the history, the traps, and the exact steps, I wrote it all out in a book called Smart Foundations. And there's also the full system if you want the complete picture of how these buried tools fit together. Everything I couldn't fit into a single video is in there, organized the way I wish someone had handed it to me years ago. The details are in the description below. Now let me show you who profits when your account freezes, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. And yet, here is the maddening part, the awareness went the other direction. The more common the form became, the less anyone talked about it. It became so ordinary that it disappeared into the background, like a light switch you stopped noticing. The people who could have told you had no reason to. The people who profited from probate had every reason not to. And so, a 120-year-old right that costs nothing became one of the best-kept open secrets in American life. But knowing the history doesn't help your family unless you know exactly how to use it, and there are traps in the fine print that can undo the whole thing. Let me walk you through those, because this is where good intentions go to die. I've watched people do this wrong. They mean well. They fill out a form and think they're covered, and then the whole thing collapses when it matters most. So let me hand you the details I had to dig out one by one. Trap number 1. Naming just one beneficiary and no backup. If the single person you name dies before you do or with you in the same accident, and you never named a secondary beneficiary, the account can fall right back into probate. The fix is simple. When you fill out the form, ask for a contingent or secondary beneficiary line. Name a first choice and a backup. Most forms allow it. Most people never ask. Trap number 2. Forgetting the account is only as good as the name on it. If you name your daughter as payable on death beneficiary and then 20 years pass and life changes, that money still goes to whoever is written on that form, not whoever you'd choose today. This form beats your will, remember? So it has to be kept current. I tell people to check their beneficiary designations every couple of years, the same way you'd check the batteries in a smoke detector. Trap number 3, and this one is cruel. Naming a minor child or grandchild directly. If you name a grandchild who is still a kid, the bank can't just hand a 12-year-old a pile of cash, so a court has to appoint someone to manage it, and now you're back in front of a judge, which is the exact thing you were trying to avoid. If you want money to reach a young person, that's a conversation about naming a trusted adult or setting up a proper arrangement for them. Don't put a child's name on the line and assume it's handled. Now, let me address the person watching this who is thinking, this is fine for people with a lot of money and a lawyer on call. That's not me. I want to talk to you directly, because this next part is built for exactly your situation. You don't need a big estate. You don't need any estate. You don't need a lawyer, a notary, an appointment, or a single dollar. If you have one bank account with your name on it, checking, savings, a certificate of deposit, doesn't matter. You can do this with what you already have. This week, here is your plan. And I've made it so plain you could hand it to a neighbor. Call your bank or walk in. Say these exact words. I'd like to add a payable on death beneficiary to my accounts. That's the magic phrase. Payable on death. If the person looks unsure, ask them to check with the manager, because I promise you the form exists, they may just not do it often. Bring what you'll need so you only go once. Bring the full legal name of the person you want the money to go to. Bring their date of birth and, if you can, their social security number and address. Banks often ask for it to identify the beneficiary correctly. Bring a backup name too, your contingent beneficiary. Ask for that second line specifically. Do it for each account, checking, savings, and any certificate of deposit you hold at that bank. One form each, or sometimes one form covers several. Let them guide you. And here's the free bonus most tellers won't volunteer. Your brokerage or retirement accounts have their own version, the transfer on death form. If you have money at a brokerage, call them too and ask for transfer on death registration. Same result. Money skips the court. You'll walk out in under 20 minutes. No fee will show up on your statement because there is no fee. And you will have done, for free, in one short visit, the single thing that spares your spouse or your children, the frozen account and the probate maze. I have watched families torn apart over locked money. This little errand quietly prevents all of it. Let me give you one more thing you already have that makes this bulletproof: a piece of paper and a pen. After you set up the payable on death forms, write down, in plain handwriting, which accounts you hold, at which banks, and who the beneficiary is on each. Not the passwords, just the map. Because a payable on death account only works if your family knows it exists and knows to bring a death certificate to that specific bank. I have seen accounts sit unclaimed for years, eventually turned over to the state as unclaimed property, simply because nobody knew the account was there. The form and the list together cost you nothing and an hour of your time. That's the whole defense. So now you've got the free form, the history behind it, and the traps to avoid. That would be enough. But I promised you a buried document at the start, and I keep my promises. Because there is an older, quieter version of this, the original from that 1904 case, that gives you something the modern form doesn't, and almost no one uses it anymore. Let me lay the last document on the table. Go back to that New York case in Totten, 1904. The woman in that case didn't fill out a modern payable on death form. Those didn't exist yet. She did something even simpler. She walked into her bank and opened an account titled in her own name, in trust for the person she wanted to receive it. Just those words on the account itself. Jane Smith, in trust for John Smith. That's it. She controlled it completely while she lived, and the court ruled that when she died, it passed straight to the named person outside of probate. That is the Totten Trust. And here is what makes it remarkable. It is not a real, complicated, expensive trust with a lawyer and a thick binder of documents. Lawyers sometimes call it a poor man's trust for exactly that reason. It gave ordinary working people, folks who could never afford a formal estate plan, the same power to pass money directly to their loved ones that the wealthy paid attorneys thousands to arrange. A savings account with 3 words added to the title. That was the whole instrument. Now, in most states today, the payable on death form has absorbed the Totten Trust. They function the same way, and the bank's payable on death designation is the modern, standardized descendant of that 1904 ruling. But here's why I wanted you to know the original. When you understand that this power comes from a plain principle that you have always been allowed to earmark your own money for the person of your choosing without asking a court's permission, you stop being intimidated by the whole business of estates and probate and legal machinery. You realize the expensive version was never the only version, it was just the one they showed you, And here is the detail that closes the loop, the thing that made me certain this had been buried on purpose. This mechanism has been sitting in the law, fully valid, for over a century. Generations of Americans have died with frozen accounts and grieving families who paid probate lawyers thousands of dollars while a three-word account title, blessed by a court in 1904, would have handed the money over in an afternoon. The knowledge existed, it was written down, it was upheld by the highest court in New York, and somehow the people who most needed it were the least likely to ever hear it. That's the pattern I keep finding, over and over, in everything I dig into. The simple, free, old way didn't disappear because it stopped working. It disappeared because there was no money in reminding you of it. A free form earns the bank nothing. A skip probate earns the lawyer nothing. So the light switch stayed on the wall, and everyone just stopped pointing at it. But you're pointing at it now, and this weekend you can flip it. Let me tell you exactly what to do with what you now know, so this doesn't become one more thing you meant to get around to. Pick up the phone Monday, or walk into your bank on your next errand. Say the words, payable on death. Name your person. Name your backup. Do the same for your brokerage with a transfer on death form. Write down the little map of which accounts sit where. That is the entire job. 120 years of buried law, put to work for your family in the time it takes to renew a library card. Here's what I want you to feel right now. This was never about paperwork. It's about the fact that somebody almost let your family sit in a frozen lobby with $11 and a funeral bill when a free signature could have carried them through. You just took that risk off the table. You just made sure the money you spent a lifetime earning lands in the hands you meant it for the same day. No court, no stranger deciding. If you're the kind of person who's always felt that the simplest, most honest way of doing things got quietly shoved aside so somebody could sell you the complicated version, you're exactly who I make these for. You were right to be suspicious. You were right all along. So do something for me. Tell me in the comments, had you ever heard the words payable on death before today, yes or no? Just that. And if you want, tell me which state you're watching from, because the probate rules that squeeze families the hardest are worse in some states than others, and I read every one of these. Leave the comment. This audience doesn't speak up often, but your one word might be the nudge that gets a stranger to protect their own family. And if you believe, like I do, that this kind of plain, useful, buried American know-how ought to be dug back up and handed around freely the way it should have been all along, then come with me. Subscribe and stand with the folks recovering the things we were quietly charged to forget. Next time, I'm opening the ledger on the one line you can add to the deed of your house that does for your home exactly what this form does for your bank account, and why the title companies would rather you never asked. I'll see you there. You wrote the checks for 40 years. You deserve to protect every dollar. Inside my membership, the Practical Ways Circle, I continue this video and walk you through the payable on death setup, step by step. Ask me your own question, and a real person, me, answers you myself. You're not doing this alone. Practical folks like you are already inside. Just point your phone's camera at the code on the screen. Cancel anytime, one click.